All right, my friends. As I said before, I don't remember if I told you the story or I didn't tell the story, but I'll tell it again anyway. Here I see that I told the story about George Washington with the candles, the Hanukkah. I told it twice. And the first time they watched it like 100 people. The second time they watched it like almost 300 people. So it's the same story. I just gave it a little bit of a different title. The same story. So repeating it doesn't hurt. Here's a story about the Rebbe Rashab, Rebbe Shalom Dovber. There was a woman that had her husband left her. Or left her. He left her with two young children, and her her husband left Judaism. He left Judaism. She saw little by little he was, not doing the commandments. He was chumming around with the non-Jews, and then he just ran away with this lady, and nobody knows where he was. Nobody knows what happened. Now, in Judaism, this is a very tragic thing because in Judaism, a woman cannot just get married on her own. If her husband leaves her, right, by a non-Jew, they can. If a husband leaves the wife, so she can remarry. You can remarry. A non-Jew, just by the way, a woman who is officially married cannot have relations with another man. This is forbidden for a non-Jew. A woman who's officially married, she cannot have relations with a strange man. But if her husband leaves her or puts her out of the house and says that's how nothing, then they're officially divorced. They don't have to have a divorce bill or anything, and she can remarry. Not the case in Judaism. In Judaism, once a woman is married, then she can never get married again, ever, unless her husband dies or gives her a bill of divorce. Only in those two cases. If her husband leaves her, if her husband says, I don't want to be married to you anymore, doesn't make any difference. She can't get married again until it has to be ascertained that her husband is either dead, there has to be witnesses that say that, or he gives her a bill of divorce. She has the bill of divorce. Okay, here we have a case where the woman husband left, and she was what's called a living widow. In other words, her husband is still alive, but she's a widow. She's not married, but she can't get married to anyone else. That's called, in Hebrew, it's called an aguna. Aguna. By the way, after World War II, there were a lot of cases like this. There were a lot of cases like this because people were put into concentration camps and separated, and only the woman survived. But she didn't know, is her husband still alive or is she not alive? Is her husband still alive or is he not alive? She didn't know, so she can't get married until it happened. There were great rabbis that decided this. There was a rabbi of Satmar, Rabbi Yoel of Satmar, these genius rabbis that decided, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, they knew all the laws, looked for any sort of small evidence that they could find, maybe written in some. Okay, let's get back to our story. Here, there's the rabbi of this lady is trying to find her husband, that she can't find him. And no matter where she goes, and she's also a simple lady. She's just a, and she has these two children. She has to take care of them, and she's dependent on the charity of the community. And she can't get remarried, and she can't get a job, and she's stuck. And so somebody tells her to go to the first Rebbe of to the Rebbe of Chabad, Rebbe Rashab. And this was like, in the late 1800s, the early 1900s. He passed away in 1920. So she went to him. She went to Lubavitch. She got there and she discovered that the Rebbe does not see women. But they said to her, write a letter, write a note, give it to the Rebbe's secretary, and the Rebbe's secretary will take it in to the Rebbe, and maybe he'll give you an answer. So she said, okay. So she wrote a little note. She wrote a note. My husband left me as much as she could, all the details. Gave it to the Rebbe's secretary. The Rebbe's secretary went into the Rebbe. A half an hour later, or whatever came out, go to the Prague, Czechoslovakia, go to Prague. Prague or Warsaw, go to Warsaw. You'll find your husband in Warsaw. So she says, okay, simple lady. She's a simple lady. She has her little suitcase with her, with a few of her, clothes or whatever. And the Chassidim hear about this, and immediately they buy her a ticket to go to Warsaw. And they also give her money that she can, get a hotel over there for a while and stay there until she finds her husband. and for food. They gather up money, they collect money, and they give her money, and they put her on the train. She's got the Rebbe's blessing, and she gets off it's a 1 day drive or a 2 day, whatever, as long as the trip is, the train ride, and she gets off in the train depot of Warsaw. She gets out, and it's huge. It's huge. And Warsaw is not like a little town, like Lubavitch or something. It's like a massive city with like 1 million, 2 million, who knows how many people are living in Warsaw. It's like a big hub of people. And the train stations, like people are busy and people are going by, and there's trains all over the place and announcements and and she's just standing there with her suitcase, and she doesn't know where to go. What she's supposed to do? She'll find her husband in Warsaw, and she doesn't know which way to go. She speaks Russian, she speaks Yiddish a little bit, but she doesn't speak Polish at all. The people over, so she says, "Excuse me," to somebody. People are just walking by and brushing by, and she doesn't know what to do. She puts her case down, and this is already after she's been searching for her husband for months and months, who knows, maybe even years, frustrating. And now she realizes, how helpless she is, and she puts the suitcase down and she just starts to weep. What's she going to do? All of a sudden, she hears a voice, somebody saying to her in Yiddish, "Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you?" She opens up her eyes, and there's a religious Jew standing in front of her. She says, "Yes, I'm my husband. I'm looking for my husband, and I went to this Rebbe of Chabad, and Rebbe Shalom Dovber, and he told me to come to Warsaw. And now I'm in Warsaw, and I don't know where to go. And please help me. Can you think you can help me?" He said, "Well, what does your husband look like?" She said, "Oh, my husband, well, he looks like this, but maybe he lost weight, and he used to have a beard, but maybe shaved it off. He has a little mark here on his forehead, like a scar once he fell down." The man said, "Oh, I know where your husband is. I know where your husband is. You see that road over there? Let me take you over here." He takes her outside of the depot. He says, "You see that street over there? You cross over the road, you walk down the street, you'll see there's a bar that it's all like painted red on the outside. And it's the only building with red. Go into that bar. Your husband's sitting in the back of the bar playing cards. That's where he goes every day." She said, "Really? He says, "Yeah. That's." He said, "Scar over here, right? Yeah, that's it." Go and see. So she schleps down the road, and she goes to this other street, and she walks down the street, and she sees there's the only room with the only what is a store that's all painted red outside. And she goes, and sure enough, it's a bar. She goes inside, and it's all noisy and smoky, and people are talking, and she has to adjust her eyes to what's going on. She goes to the back, and she sees there's people playing cards there, but her eyes are still, and they're burning sort of from the smoke, and it's all dark. And she looks, and she's looking at the people to see if she says, all of a sudden, one of the card players yells out, "Sora, Sora, how did you find me here? How did you find me here?" He says in Yiddish, "How did you find me here? How did you know I was here?" So she looks, and she sees some guy. He comes out, stops playing cards, puts his cards. He looks at her. He says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't." She looks at him. He doesn't look, but she sees the scar on his forehead, and he looks. That's her husband's voice. That's her voice. That's his voice. And he says, "I'm sorry I left you with the two children." It's her husband. He says, "Listen, since I left you, it's only been bad. I've wanted to come back. I'm so ashamed. I'm so embarrassed. I don't know what to do. What have I done? I've left you. I've left the children. I've abandoned you. I've left Judaism. I left God. I left my common sense. Please forgive me." He starts to cry. He falls down on his knees. "I beg you. I beg you." And nobody really pays attention to him. She said, "Let's go outside." They go outside. He says to her, "Listen, I promise I'll return to my Jewish self. I swear I'll be a different person. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. Take me back." She said, "Okay, no problem. Take the train, next train, go back to our house. I'll take a train after that, and we'll meet. You go back to our house. You go immediately to the rabbi of the town and tell him what happened." So it was. And she took the train. Next day, she went back to her town. He is already becoming rehabilitated by the rabbi of the town rabbi's town. And they lived, they came back. He grew his beard. He went back to Judaism. And she's tremendously happy. So grateful. So she takes a few dollars, whatever she's got, and she goes back, puts in an envelope, and she also wants to pay the Chassidim back. So it's like a half a year, whatever's later. She has a little more. She puts it in an envelope to repay the Chassidim, and also she wants to give the Rebbe some money. And she goes back, and they say the Rebbe is still not receiving people. But you can write a letter of thanks. And they said to her, you know what? I got it with his secretary of the Rebbe says to the lady, I have an idea. You want to say thanks to the Rebbe? The Rebbe comes out of his room to pray in the morning. When the Rebbe comes out, give me the envelope, and I'll hand it to the Rebbe, and I'll say, this woman wants to say thank you. She said, oh, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. Gives her the envelope. The Rebbe comes out of his room. She looks at the Rebbe, and she faints. She passes over. Faints. And she walks, and the Rebbe sort of looks down, and he continues walking. And they bring one of the Hasidim as a doctor, they bring a doctor, and they bring her, she just passed out. They give her some water to drink. And what happened? She said, was that the Rebbe? So they said, yeah, he's really impressive. That's what fast. He said, he was really impressive, really impressed you. That's the first time we ever saw anybody faint. She said, no. She said, that's the man that I saw in the train depot in Warsaw. That's the one. He was the Jew that told me where to go. And he was in Warsaw. So they checked, they saw, on that particular day, they remembered which day it was. The Rebbe definitely was not in Warsaw. But they asked the Rebbe's secretary, and the Rebbe's secretary said, at that day, at that time, it was very strange. Now I understand something. I went into the Rebbe's room, and he was just sitting in his chair, and he was looking at the ceiling as though he wasn't even there. He didn't even notice me when I was coming in. He was just looking up at the ceiling. So it must have been that the Rebbe somehow or other threw himself into the train station in Warsaw in order to help this lady. And so the Rebbe was, so to speak, at two places at once. How could this be? I don't know, but it was. And we see also that Elijah the prophet did the same thing. He was in all these different places, not in two places at once, but he was up in heaven and he was in the physical world at the same time in a physical body. So we don't understand the mysteries of life, and they're impossible to understand, but the Rebbes do understand. And that's a story about how much Rebbes care about each and every Jew. Have a good day with Mashiach now. See you all tomorrow.